Very good afternoon. Welcome to this panel on D&I as part of ETHR World's Conference on Human Capital. As our focus is on employee wellness, we believe D&I is a critical aspect of not only employee wellness, but also employee motivation, integration, and overall productivity and culture at the organization. It is my pleasure to host D&I leaders from across India today, from leading companies as part of this panel. I'm going to start with Prachi. Prachi, I meet a lot of business and HR leaders who haven't yet somehow internalized the need for D&I initiatives at their company or at their organizations. So, as a leader who has been working in the D&I space for over a decade, Prachi, what do you believe? Why do you believe D&I is important for every workplace? Irrespective of the sector, the size, location, demography, and how does one really get that kind of management or even HR buy-in to aspects of D&I?
Sure. Brilliant question. Thanks for that, Aparna. I feel wherever there are people, we need to have diversity and inclusion, because unless we are really inclusive of everyone because of their differences and not despite of the differences, we can't really create wiser solutions, intelligent solutions for client. And I think that is the miss. What we need to do with business is not really introduce D&I as an HR agenda, but a business imperative, that it makes most sense to be more innovative, to be more creative in your client solutionings, if you're more diverse in people, in the knowledge that they bring in the creativity that they bring in the ideas that they bring in. And the more diverse we are, the more global we are, the more diverse we are within a particular sector, within a particular country, within a particular race as well, is so very important. Otherwise, we get the same kind of solutions. Even if we look different and we sound the same, which means that even if we have gender balance, for example, and if we don't know how to harness that diversity, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. So it's really important to make our business leaders understand, and they do understand, that it is a business imperative and it's not an HR agenda.
Great. Roma, you come from a company which has offices across India, practically, through India, and there's a lot of sales force which works through the organization. How do you really make this trickle down or reach every corner of the organization?
So firstly, Aparna, I'll say that, making sure that everyone understands it's a journey. It doesn't happen in a day or a few months, I would say that it's an ongoing journey for us to make sure, especially as new people keep coming in, to make sure that everyone understands why this is important and how it affects each and every person. I think, when we make D&I about one or two demographic groups, then maybe we narrow it down too much. And a lot of people start thinking that D&I is, nothing beyond an initiative. It is not an initiative. It is about how you, interact with your teams every day, right? It's a way of life, right? It's how you make each and every decision that you make about people around you. So I think it's important to have an ongoing conversation. I think leaders have a large role to play by talking about this, by bringing people's attention to this, and then having ongoing conversation about how it can help each and every person become better as an employee, as a manager, get more out of your teams, be more productive. So I think we have to make it personal to everyone, why this is important to you and why this is important to the organization, and how does that belief system therefore match. So I think it's an ongoing conversation, but it is not just about talking to them so that they internalize it and start practicing it. It is also about then starting to embed it in the people processes.
Thank you. I think I really like the fact that you have brought out a 360-degree perspective. And it's not just about stakeholders or employees, but also your own growth as a person when you work with different people across different segments. I'll come to you, Zainab. As you know, we've been talking to a lot of HR leaders and business leaders about D&I. But one prevalent myth which I come across a lot, and I'm sure all of you have also heard it, is there is this some kind of pejorative perception around D&I that any kind of D&I initiatives, especially hiring initiatives, they compromise merit. Do you agree with this, or what is your take on balancing merit and DNI?
Uh, but firstly, that when I heard the other panelists speak, for me it is getting increasingly clear that DNI is not seen as an employee engagement agenda anymore. It's a business imperative. And if you consider truly and invest sensibly in the inclusion and diversity agenda, that's how we kind of know it at KPMG, that inclusion precedes diversity, because diversity is a given natural solution that we have. Nature by core is diverse, but inclusion is something that we as individuals and organizations, and through organic cultural change, we need to make the right investments to bear fruit. So that will not really come in unless you have a truly inclusive workforce. Now, what we have as a workforce is something that we build in terms of retention and in the employee journey process. But in order to attract more diverse talent, for me, that will only come in through diversity hiring. And in the post-COVID situation, I think people have been force shocked to move out of their comfort zones when they talked about merit and location, to look at marginalization and delocationing in itself. Because today people have no option but to look at these communities and people from different locations where their comfort zones are not there anymore. So I think whether it's an agenda which is close to my heart in terms of affirmative action for historically marginalized groups, and I'm taking into account SC, ST, OBC, persons with disability, LGBTIQ people who have come in from different ethnic groups or geographic locations, and economically disadvantaged communities. How would you not then prioritize looking at diversity hiring from these marginalized groups if the entire discussion is only going to be about merit? While most of the business will continue to focus on merit and expertise, I think we need to also look at merit, expertise, and lived realities of people, because it is the exact thing that Prachi said in the beginning, that our lived realities is what makes us unique, and hence the value proposition in offering innovative solutions. Otherwise, your employee engagement would go down, your absenteeism would increase, and at the same time productivity and brand value would dip. So if you're going to look only at a significant um, area coming from only looking at merit based applications, then we would not go ahead. If that was the case, why would we even consider merit for women and girls in general? Because if we were to take that argument, we would be stuck in the World War II situation where women were only carted towards workshops because there were no men to work around.
Sheetal, I'd like to bring you into this conversation now. So, and you've heard our, panelists from Ruma, Prachi, and Zainab. What is really your take on DNI? How do you integrate it into the processes at the organization? And how at Schindler are you looking at diversity hiring? How have you managed to move that mandate forward?
Thanks, Aparna. When you talk about diversity, for me, diversity honestly is not about gender or LGBTQ or a particular race or religion, etc. For us, diversity is about diversity in thoughts. It's about diversity in the opinions, in the ideas that you're bringing to the table, right? And in fact, at Schindler, what we've done is we don't call it the diversity and inclusion agenda. We call it the inclusion and diversity agenda, pretty much, echoing what my co-panelists have already said, that it's about becoming inclusive. There is no point bringing so many people to a party if they can't dance together, right? So it's as simple as that. And that's what Schindler has been focusing on. When you talk about hiring, um, we, to be honest, we started off with gender diversity. But if I tell you the real challenge that I had when I joined Schindler 9 years back, was to first start with hiring people from outside the elevator industry itself. So it's more about, are you able to bring different experiences and different backgrounds and different thought processes into your organization? And just pretty much like what Prati said, it's about then bringing them on and making sure you create that kind of an environment which allows them to bring out that uniqueness that every individual has.
Right. No, that's good to know. The reason I asked about hiring is that I think we are all on the same page that inclusion is really what matters. But I talk about hiring because that's really where I see a lot of roadblock with organizations and a lot of the unconscious bias that comes out in the hiring process. You know, how are you shortlisting the CVs? How have you written your job descriptions? Are your JDs written in a way that somebody reading it somewhere will not want to apply because they don't think this company is for them? And I think that in some way, if you would look at this as a linear spectrum, somehow hiring initiatives really drive the agenda for me, because only when you're able to attract a diverse talent pool can you actually proceed to create an inclusive workplace. And the most leakage, if I may use that word, in the talent pipeline when we study organizations is what we find, what goes actually wrong in the hiring process. I really love the fact how all of you talked about integrating DNI or IND into every part of the organization, into every process. I'll come back to you, Prachi, now. And you have a fairly large organization and you work at an APAC level where you're not just looking at one country, but probably 12, 13, 14 countries. And really, the whole spectrum of IND across jurisdictions can be so vibrant and yet so challenging to integrate into the fabric of the organization. Now, for our friends who are listening into this conversation today, I'd like you to provide some guidance to them that how really, in terms of process, have you integrated DNI into the entire employee life cycle, from really from pre-hire, and I don't even start at hiring, I call it pre-hire, to post exit. Really, what have you done and how have you achieved this level of integration into the DNA of the organization?
Right, Aparna. It's we have a DNI legacy of about 109 years. So if I start pre-hiring and post-exit, it will be a long response. But what I'll do is I'll try and sort of cover it up and say the strategy of DNI, and it doesn't matter what industry, what company, what size, has to be around three pillars. And pillar number one has to be leadership responsibility. Business leaders need to have their skin in the game. Else, as I said, it'll remain a DNI agenda, HR running after business that, these many women should get hired, these many people from the LGBT plus people and people with disability or veterans or whatever other diversity constituents. So leadership responsibility, one. And how do you sort of get that buy-in is only that it needs to hurt everyone if there's not enough diversity and inclusion in the organization. And that happens if performance appraisals are done keeping that in mind. And I'm not alluding to having targets, and because when you have very, very big targets for all diversity constituents is when there's a chance of compromising on merit. Let's not deny that completely, because there can be a diversity fatigue if we have, like, you need to hire 50% women, you need to hire so many people from other communities. That's one. The second important pillar is employee experience. What are we doing and how are we treating our current people? Do they really feel they belong to the organization? Can they really bring their whole selves to work? Can I just talk about my partner if I'm from the LGBT plus community easily and put my picture on the desktop of my vacation with my girlfriend? If I'm not okay with that, then I'm just hiding all the time. And if I'm hiding all the time, then I'm not really exploring my full potential, not giving my best to the work. That is number two. Number three, and a very, very important factor, is external eminence. It's not just enough to be passive non-discriminator anymore. It's time that we be active allies. And it is really, allyship is really a verb for us. That it goes on and on. You need to be bold, you need to be solid when it comes to external speaking events as well, and really stand up, be an upstander for anything that goes against inclusion.
No, that's very good to know. Ruma, I'll come to you. You represent one of India's leading conglomerates, and which have, who are respected across for the, brilliant culture that they have. I'd like to hear from you. How have you at the Tata Group really brought this into the day-to-day nitty-gritty of every employee or every aspect of the organization? And if we can also, talk about if you think data has a role to play, because Prachi has already alluded to, data metrics, etc. So how do you really leverage data and process to take DNI further?
So, I can talk in the larger context of the Tata Group as well, and then maybe a little bit about what we are trying to do at Tata Consumer Products. And I would, completely agree with what Prachi was saying on, the need for leadership to understand, where is it that they stand? Because it's not enough for us to be believers, right? It is important to also focus on the outcomes and have very visible outcomes that really sort of show that we are standing behind what we really believe in, right? So we focus a lot on data. In fact, at the Tata Group level, I think data is mapped closely on diversity, a lot of diversity and inclusion metrics, which are more high level, and they are presented back. They are tracked at the company at the entire group level. So we have some 60 plus companies in the Tata Group, and they get tracked for all the companies within the Tata Group and get presented back to leadership. And on multiple parameters, from hiring to attrition to representation in leadership levels to especially when we look at senior leadership, and we know that especially on gender we don't see enough women in senior leadership. So those metrics get presented back, and there is a lot of conversation within the group on how companies are making change happen, and being able to openly talk about it, and leaders advocating at the group stage, at the group level, on how is it that they are bringing about this change. So I would absolutely agree that data is very, very critical, because data tells a story. It tells you whether on the ground are you able to achieve what is it that you have set out to do. uh, and then data also helps you to change processes, right? If your hiring metrics are showing that you are not really there, then you know where you want to make the change happen. You know
Right.
that you have to focus on certain parts of the business where hiring is a little more difficult, right? Similarly, attrition numbers, if you're if you can see that there is a big skew in middle versus junior versus senior, then you know that your lateral hiring needs to pick up pace. So you need to figure out why is it if women are exiting faster than men, if for example that is your focus, then why is that happening? So I think data is very critical, and it helps to drive the change in process, because then data tells you where employee experience also needs to change, right? So that also helps to drive the change that needs to happen in employee experience, so that people feel more included, that they feel they can fully contribute, and they feel that they have a fair playing field for them to be able to do their best.
Well, thank you for that. And I think that's a brilliant point, because in a lot of organizations we look at, there is a lot of perception about equality. And, because a lot of leaders believe all is okay, but only when you confront them with their own data, across functional verticals or across different bands, that the picture is clearly visible to them on where the gaps are. And absolutely, I think to move towards a milestone based performance matrix, or looking at, where are we really moving year on year on our DNI agenda, that kind of a data analysis that you talked about is really going to be a game changer, because then organizations have their own reference point of some kind to see where are they improving or where they need to bring in focus. Zainab, you really come from a very multidimensional, focus and experience, especially with your, your contribution to law and policy in India, and really changing the law progressively on several aspects. What are you seeing as the emerging areas of focus, both globally and in the Indian context, for an IND conversation?
I think firstly, from a global context, a lot of stuff that happens in the global arena may some way be connected to what happens in India and yet not. And I'm taking the liberty of actually calling it out that at some point of time, a lot of us are plain tokenist when it comes to representations, because we tend to kind of fake it with tokenism, because all of us happily sign up for Black Lives Matter in the US because it's a trending topic, and we call ourselves courageous conversationalists. And at the same time, when you have caste based or religion based atrocities happening in India, we tend to kind of steer clear of these because these are supposedly quote unquote sensitive topics to deal with. So I think there is one is a little bit of tokenistic approach that we take. But I think if you look at it from the changing contour of law and policy, and this is again building on conversations that we've had, like for example, the ever-changing landscape of sexual harassment at the workplace faced by different marginalized communities. Now, be it cisgendered women or cisgendered men, or about those who come in from different marginalized communities. One is we somehow tend to think that persons with disabilities may not have a sexual life, or may be actually immune to these kind of attacks, or for that matter LGBTIQ people at best who might harass them, someone from their own community. I think the fact is that we need to have more sensible and sensitive guidance coming in from lawmakers, and I think organizations, MNCs, Indian corporates are all kind of making effort to kind of making workplaces um, who have zero tolerance to any kind of harassment or sexual, to harassment in general and to sexual harassment in particular. The second thing is affirmative action around historically marginalized groups. And I moved away from discussions calling out for only SC, ST, and OBC groups, because there are people within these pockets who may not really be the most marginalized, and there may be people who are economically marginalized or marginalized due to ethnicity or religion or geography. And I think when you, or for that matter, orientation, and it's these historically marginalized groups that we need to now look at from an affirmative action framework. So while the Honorable Prime Minister and all the efforts made around affirmative action on caste-based reservations, I think a new policy guideline that we would probably need to look at in the coming few is how do we look at, bringing to the fore, I won't say mainstreaming, because I think that's too top heavy a word to bring into the workplace, because just by providing economic opportunities and well-being we cannot mainstream people. But in terms of providing economic opportunities to help people tide through this economic situation. The third part which I feel is the entire way we look, react to and deal with multiculturalism issues. Today India, among many other countries globally, is dealing through a lot of socio cultural issues, and it's also because of the way we understand politics and the way we identify and say no side is right, wrong. But the fact is that these conversations have seeped into our bedroom, into our living rooms, into our phones, and ultimately even into the workplace. For me as a DNI leader, I feel a lot of emphasis moving ahead would be to see how you can work towards creating a more integrated workforce where multiculturalism is not tolerated because our office has zero tolerance policies to harassment on the grounds of caste or religion. But in order to make it a truly catalytic workplace, are we celebrating individual differences? And for me, it brings to mind Dr. Lorraine Kramini's quote, which says that I am not different. It is I am as unique as you are. So I think in terms of celebrating our individual differences, is that these three areas would be top keys.
And I think, just to reiterate to our audience, I think it's very important to move from the spectrum of tolerance to celebration. And I think every time, because invariably our systems are not made for, are only made for majority communities. And there is always this, patchwork solution or fixing to integrate people who are not from the majority communities. And at some point of time, we have to make those spaces, in our policies, in our systems, processes, infrastructure, whatever aspect it is, to to really call for full integration and full authenticity in allowing equal opportunity, benefit, and performance. Sheetal, I'll come to you now. In the past few months, on account of the pandemic and the ensuing pressure that a lot of businesses have faced, unfortunately, there has been a lot of pressure on budgets, and just perceptionally, aspects like DNI or a lot of HR work are seen as non-essential. How would you guide our audience today to really re-bring the focus or reiterate the focus on DNI, in fact, bring it out more in the current context?
I will actually, Aparna, speak about what we've already done at Schindler, or rather are in the process of doing.
That'd be great.
Um, you're absolutely right. Right now, there is this whole fight for talent. So while a lot of companies are laying off people, at the same time, it's becoming difficult to manage and bring out the best from your own employees. So what I'm really trying to get at is, if you had first, say, 5,000 people who could do the work, now I have 4,500. So how do I make sure that each person is delivering and is productive is the question, right? And this means different opportunities. It would take in upskilling. It would mean training them. It would mean keeping them motivated, keeping them, having the people connect with them. So in terms of what we've done during COVID, I'll just talk about one measure. While we have a hiring freeze, we will just be doing replacements maybe for the next 2 quarters or so. We are working on building a diversity pipeline, an external diversity pipeline, wherein we're already proactively meeting candidates and keeping the pool ready so that if and when we do have a position, we already have a list of candidates available. So my advice and my guidance would be that we have to think differently. The old measures of having, like we've done measures like when you asked me about hiring, Aparna, we've done things like having a blind CV where we blank out, certain information so that no one is biased while looking at the CV. Or our, job descriptions are gender neutral, for example. We went back and checked every single job description and made them gender neutral. So, however, these are basic things according to me. Now, what we need to do is think a bit differently and innovatively, and some of these, and be proactive in whatever measures that we are taking. I don't think targets will work at this time, because when my manager has a replacement to take, he would rather prefer, or she would rather prefer, to take a person who has experience, and will be on the job immediately. And to bring that mindset change in the manager, that no, this is the time to invest. We're actually also running unconscious bias kind of workshops to the last mile, up to the employees, our technicians who have done, like a vocational education also. We're reaching out up to the last mile when it comes to bringing awareness in that topic.
Thank you. So I think last 10 minutes, we've talked about the philosophy of DNI, and we've talked about how really it needs to go full spectrum and not just be an HR agenda. I want each one of you, and I'll request each one of you, and we'll start with you, Prachi, if you can share one or two flagship initiatives, and we can go around the table, that you have created, curated, implemented at your organization, because I think our audience will really benefit from seeing how these ideas manifest in reality, and they can of course pick up a few of these brilliant ideas and take them forward as well.
Sure, happy to start. So for various diversity constituents, we have several programs. I'll take it one by one. Let's talk about women first. So returning mothers, we have a program called Charisma for Returning Mothers. And that was launched about a year and a half ago. And our attrition rate, which was a little higher amongst returning mothers, has come down by about 9%. So what we do is a suite of offerings. We have policies like mothers who are still lactating can travel for work along with their child and a caretaker. And IBM pays for the stay and the travel for the caretaker and the child. And therefore, suddenly we see that mothers don't really say no to client travel even when their child is small. And this year what we've done is we've actually not just opened it for mothers, we've opened it for all genders. So even fathers, same-sex partners can take their child when the child is still small on travel along with a caretaker. And that primarily why we've done that, we've opened it to all genders and not just mothers, is because we don't want mothers to be always the primary caregivers like it is mostly in India. So fathers should take equal responsibility, and that is one. Another is for women who are high potential, senior women. We do a program called Tan Mantra with IIM Bangalore. It's an exclusive program that they do, and we see a whole lot of women getting into executive roles with that. Similarly, we have a program, a career identity program with Avatar called Disha, which is which is that a lot of women, especially in the Asian region, leave because of marriage, children, parental responsibility at the middle age. And therefore we work on that. And again, we've seen a huge lot of change in the attrition and basically the retention of middle-aged women at the mid segment. That is on women. On LGBT plus people, one is that they can self-identify themselves, and therefore it becomes important that whatever we do for the LGBT plus community, we actually see if it's making an impact. We see numbers, if it's going up, down, what's the trend like. And it's really important for us to have the whole spectrum of people, LGBT plus. So we really make sure that we hire transgender people, we hire people, we train our managers on microaggressions, we create business resource groups where these cohorts, allies and people from the community get together and make intelligent plans for the LGBT plus community, and ensuring that the number goes up and people are more comfortable in coming out. And we also have coach on calls, for example, a lot of things that people from the community would not like to discuss with their managers or even with HR. So there's a coach on call expert, which is an external partner that they can talk to. Third, people with disabilities, we again have a very accessible system. Our numbers are really showing a great trend. We hire people at all levels, and it's really important for us to have senior people from all communities, because unless that happens, we can't really, it's no good unless they are in the decision-making positions. So accessible environment, again, training managers on their attitude towards people with disability, and making sure, again, they have a career framework, because often this is a marginalized community, and there are more chances that they won't get senior roles, they won't get promotions. And it's really important for us to have a career framework for them. We again look at how many people are we hiring, promoting, and how many people are leaving us from these communities.
That's a really rich and really diverse, input. Thank you for that, Prachi. To each one of you, Sheetal, Ruma, Zaina, feel free to, just unmute yourself and go forward and tell us the brilliant initiatives at your organization to really spearhead D&I initiatives.
So just as two things to add on, and also allowing others to. So we've introduced a new networking and negotiation skills building workshop for all of our senior managers, women. It's called Talk to Win. So I think we've successfully completed 2 batches, and the success of this is basically measured by reportees in terms of what is their investment in the entire negotiating and networking space, because a lot of them come from the ambit of working in an essentially male dominated environment. And to look at avenues of networking and negotiation is extremely essential from this perspective. The second thing is a program for senior managers, for the manager plus population, is LEAP, where they are paired with an external coach and a mentor from the same business, but also an additional external mentor, which is basically an 8-month program to help in developing their leadership potential. We're now coming up for a specific AD to partner level conversations for women in terms of helping them realize their full potential in either to get into executive roles. But from the LGBT perspective, what we intend to really do is skill and hire people from different marginalized communities. And in terms of when I actually started working in the organization, we had very few people who were actually out at the workplace. Coming out is no measure of the fact that your organization is truly inclusive of no. But to the various dipstick surveys that we've done and instituted within the organization, we received a lot of comments on internalized and organization-wide homophobia, transphobia. This has taken a directional shift over the last year and a half in terms of actually working with people's manager and your reporting manager and the HR in terms of daily diversity classes to help them make a quick turnaround on issues that are faced by LGBT people at the workplace, and hence resulting in more female assigned sex at birth, minorities opting for same sex partner insurance than male sex assigned at birth. So I think from that perspective, it is truly an interesting thing to do. The third part is in terms of looking at your onboarding checklist and your flow charts when you're looking at a diversity hiring candidate, whether it is a person with disability, it's a person with a different orientation or ability, or from your second careers program, which we famously call Continuum in KPMG. For us, it is to ensure that these people are 100% assimilated within the organization and no attrition that is seen within these specific groups. So, and also from the fact that we wanted to create, just like Prachi initial maintained, that being an ally is actually a verb, and rightly so. It should be a verb for all of us, because for me, the basic definition of being an ally is someone who has a spine and who's someone who stands up against wrong or misdoings at the organization. And to match that, we've actually come up with two specific programs. One is called the Culture Catalyst, which is basically looking at the M plus population, and the Ally of Inclusion, which is basically available for all organizational levels, which help them to sign up to a pillar of their choice, undergo a gamification challenge, and basically earn the allyship badge. And for the Culture Catalyst, it is basically weaving this into 5% of their time contribution to the organization, and have reporting goals specifically from a reporting manager perspective. That is something that we do from an interesting perspective from I&D initiatives in the organization.
Right, that's very good to know. Ruma, you wanted to add?
Yeah. So let me talk about some of the programs, especially now, before my role at Tata Consumer Products, I was at Tata Sons, and therefore had visibility to a lot of what was happening across the Tata Group. I have seen that there are a number of programs and very varied programs based on the kind of business that the company is in. And just at the group level, leveraging the benefit of being able to bring so many women together. There are a number of programs, and one or two that I'd like to mention are that, one is our second career program, which I think we've been running for a really long time at the group level. And even in Tata Consumer Products, we keep hiring from that program when we have opportunities come up. And we've seen a lot of women, who have taken a break wanting to come back. And in fact, I think that that is one area where so much more can be done, especially in India, because we know that the percentage of women in India in the workforce is so low, and we know that people leave for several reasons, but there is no reason why they can't come back. And in fact, I have taken a 1.5 year break in my career, and I have come back to the Tata Group through the second career program. So I think opportunities like this are absolutely essential, especially given the context of our country, where a lot of people like to take breaks and sometimes need to take breaks. So I think that's one space where I think Tata Group's made real difference. And the other is opportunities for just mentoring, which are very critical and which we continue to keep investing in. We've had a number of programs where we provide mentoring opportunities to women at different life stages, whether it is about understanding how to manage some life stages, or whether it's about making the next career leap. And in fact, we are also again launching another program within, along with some other companies in the consumer space, where we try and provide opportunities for women to get mentored by leaders from other companies, because we've seen that it provides more of a neutral ground, right, away from office, and we've seen that it's been really helpful. That's another space. And other than that, investing in coaching, building leadership potential, gaining skills which women really need to move to the next level are some of the key initiatives that Tata Group is investing in, and also at Tata Consumer Products. We are leveraging them, and also then building our own programs that will really help us to I would say that continue to build and strengthen that sense of inclusion and belonging that we need for different kinds of people who are coming to work with us.
Well, thank you. That's a really wide spectrum again. And thank you for sharing with the audience how a lot of these programs can add value. Sheetal, we'll come to you and saving the best for the last in some way. Would love to hear from you what you have done at Schindler in the I&D space.
A lot of initiatives I think my co-panelists have spoken about already. I will just focus on maybe two things. Um, the first one is on women, where we have a Women in Leadership program, where at Schindler we understood that although we do have women, at a junior level positions, we wanted to still make them grow into leadership positions. So we have a tie-up with CEL across the globe. And in this kind of a program, you have the option of having a mentor within the company. We have an external coach. You would participate in this program with other international participants within a Schindler Group. So this program actually has been very successful. We actually send women who are in the succession pipeline for leadership positions. We send them for this kind of a program, and it's made a huge difference. The second, actually, Aparna, it's something different that I want to talk about. It's still work in progress, so I wouldn't say that it's happened already, but it's something that we really believe in. I'm not so sure if you understand the Schindler business. It's about elevators, right? So we have a large section of our employees are technicians, who are installing elevators, and then we also have technicians who are servicing elevators.
The
right?
maintenance
So pretty
bit,
much
yes.
maintenance, exactly. So they are basically in the field. Now, when we started hiring women, we realized a very simple little problem, which seems little, is that we don't have enough toilets. So we did manage to get women, but if they don't have toilets on a construction site, what is Schindler going to do about it? Because they are my employees working on someone else's site. So overall, what I'm really trying to say here is that um, when we are driving an agenda of inclusion and diversity, it doesn't only impact your employees or your leaders, it impacts your customers, it impacts the society at large. And therefore, through our corporate social responsibility program, which is called Fulfill Futures, we are now trying to focus on sanitization and bringing in, the basic infrastructure that is required to actually allow, women to go to the workplace and not have any issues, and have that convenience, at least with basic hygiene.
No, absolutely. And I personally really believe in a multi-thematic approach, whether it's through CSR programs, or even if you look at all the aspects that regulate work sites or workplaces, construction sites. There are very clear mandates that they should have absolutely full availability of washrooms, nursing rooms, etc. And I think it's only when you see that kind of, policy mandate, but private interest, that those things can move further towards implementation. So thank you. I think we're going to wrap up the panel now. Thank you very much, Prachi, Ruma, Zainab, and Sheetal, for coming and sharing, what you're doing, your rich experience really across so many years and so many aspects of diversity. We would like to wrap up this panel with just an appeal to our audience that DNI is not something to other. DNI is something to really include in your own organization. And it has a lot of long-term benefit, both tangible and intangible, to not only the performance but really the culture of the organization. And at some level, and I hear this from a lot of the CHROs that we meet, I think all of us have to reimagine our own role as HR leaders in the organization. It has to go beyond compliance. It has to go beyond just the processing of paperwork. It can really, really impact the lived experiences of people who work at your organization, because 60% of the time of your life you're spending in the organization. So with that, thank you very much once again. I hope all of you enjoyed listening in. Thank you to ET HR World once again for organizing this and giving us an opportunity to meet and interact with the diverse panel and the audience this evening. Thank you.